Today, a seasoned professional whose expertise has been instrumental in building transformational enterprise systems for some of the world's leading companies. Our guests today have been the primary driver of high-profile transformational programs at Live 360, impacting the board level as the sole staff level in the company. He has a remarkable track record of driving engineering excellence by collaborating with key business and engineering leaders to redefine process and demand accountability, significantly raising the bar for project quality and delivery. In his stellar career, he has delivered numerous medium and large-scale projects across prestigious organizations like Meta, Google, Microsoft, Intel. At Meta, he redefined division-wide projects involving procurement, budgeting, and resource management suites through in-house customization of the platform. At Google, he developed a AI/ML model that dramatically increased the accuracy of data center capacity forecasts. Not just confined to the corporate world, he has also ventured into entrepreneurship, working on a startup that develops innovative apps targeting ambient environmental noise cancellation, and runs an interview coaching business. He's here to share his insights on technology, leadership, and the impact of AI on enterprise systems. Join us as we explore his journey and learn from his rich experience in the tech world. Robert Svilpa, what has been your greatest struggle and how did you overcome it?
Huh. Um, I mean, you can classify them into different perspectives, right? I started off as a software engineer, software developer, moving into any kind of a leadership role. The struggle is that, if you are managing and mentoring people that are new, is to give them the space to solve the problem. You sign the problem, you're there as a resource to help them if they ask for it, but to give them the space to actually to use the opportunity to learn and figure, like, struggle through, figure out the problem, solve it, have it reviewed, discuss the solution that they chose. And it's just like when you ask somebody to do a retrospective, it's like, what could you have done better? So the fortunate thing is, before I went back and got my degree, I worked for a while in media, in television and radio. And my last role was as a manager, as a director of production at my campus radio station, my alma mater, broadcast radio station. And and it was a volunteer based production, like, everything from on-air personalities to the news staff, to, like, there was only 5 people on staff that were paid, and I was one of the paid individuals, coming back after having been in television and doing other things. And so one of the key aspects of working with volunteers is that it's not a case of, you as the manager are doing everything and just telling people to go and do stuff. You're actually identifying people based on their skill sets and their experience and their readiness to be able to take on authority and to take on the accountability for, whether it's the planning and the execution on the day of, and then quality assessment, and et cetera. And so I had, a fair amount of experience, a good, like, 3-4 years, 4 or 5 years of experience working with people and training them and getting them to a point where I could just say, I'm accountable. I'm responsible for all the hardware and the, $2 or $3 million worth of equipment. I will drive the production vehicle to the location after I park and get everything, initially set up, like, just to get power going. You guys now are on your own, and I'm here to help, but I'm essentially I am a facilitator more than a resource, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so coming back and being an individual contributor as a software developer, and then moving into like a software development lead position, and then moving into technical program management, and becoming and working with both development managers and product managers and things as peers, but as essentially the accountable one. The temptation is always for most people to be able to say, you know what, I can just do this myself. I can get this done in 15 minutes instead of letting you thrash around and struggle on this for 2 or 3 or 4 days, right? It's a simple, in your head, you go, it's a simple problem. I mean, what the hell, right? But at the same time, it's people learn best, and people learn how to solve problems. They're you build more neural connections by struggling than you do by having the answer fed to you.
Yes.
At the same time, you are balancing that out with the needs of the business, because the business wants things done quickly and cheaply. And so a place like Google, Microsoft, Intel, and even to some extent Meta is very will allow you leeway to be able to give people that freedom to struggle on their own and for a little while. In fact, it's in the company sort of the leadership principles, and I'm borrowing that term from Amazon, but everybody's got it.
Okay.
Everybody's got the company principles of, like, you don't go running to somebody to ask them to help you solve a problem or just have them solve it for you. You need to go through it, think through it, and provide some opportunity, some options for discussion where you can sit down around a whiteboard and actually, go through the pros and cons yourself with a mentor or with your team, and identify the solution, and then build out the path towards achieving that. And so from that regard, I've got that little bit more patience than a lot of and the typical individual contributor to management resource type individual that will get promoted. At the same time, I do have those frustrations of going, this is not a hard problem, right?
Yeah.
This
You
is
have
not a hard problem. It should be like, these are the right now, just sitting here, these are the two options I can just see. Let's talk through them, but people, again, don't learn through success. They learn much better through failure. And so that's a challenge. Then from the other side, a big challenge is that I mentioned it is the business need for rapid success. And especially as we get further down the line and we're talking about AI, and we're talking about the reason that AI is becoming it's both a promise and a threat, is because the promise is that a individual can go use AI, which has essentially digested and sorted out and compartmentalized and been able to sort of identify all the various solutions that have been done in the past, and can also figure out how to build a compound solution for a complex problem based on past examples. So that's the promise. The threat is that everybody believes that because it has this rapidity of being able to go through the data and generate a prototype or a suggestion for a solution, that it's smarter than a human. and that's and we can just pick that up and run with it, and it should be sufficient.
Yes, I think that we are mistaken about the capabilities of AI. And also, you mentioned something very important that is a trend in the industry over the centuries, actually, that is transform not only labor and work, but also knowledge into a commodity.
Right.
So there's always let's say, this will to move into the direction of a commodity, because as you mentioned, the companies, they need things to be done in a faster way, in a cheaper way as well. That's how it runs, it how it works, and how they make profit.
Right, exactly. And especially, I mean, you're looking at today, over the last like 18 to 36 months, AI has gone from being a research project to now it actually is part of products, and we're seeing all of its pimples, all of its flaws, the wrinkles, the missing, like the I watched somebody that's in the film FX industry posted a video that was generated of, essentially, it was they created a storyboard for the film that essentially was a amalgamation of a bunch of different sort of action film type sequences, right? Like, a fighter jet coming in and a vertical takeoff and landing, or a motorcycle chase across the city, a bunch of flamethrowers or machine gun fire. It was just a mishmash of everything. They created a storyboard with, like, and in terms of a prompt that the AI film generator was supposed to build, and it was a mess. You could, had motorcycles going up vertical walls, and going sideways, and it had fighter jets that were basically the size of a car coming in and landing between two buildings, and having a guy hop on the wing and then into the cockpit without opening the cockpit shield or whatever. Just all sorts of crazy stuff, things blowing up and then reconstituting themselves. And it was, it's indicative of how it's at a very childlike state right now. It's the equivalent of asking a 2-year-old to do something sophisticated to save the world. I mean, that's a little over dramatic, but it really is.
Mm-hmm.
We're asking it to do something that's way beyond its capabilities, and assuming that because it's got this huge quantity of data that it's digested, and in the case of the film effects thing, it's digested a whole bunch of action films. And so it's, and you and I know that a lot of the action films sequences are absolutely ridiculous, and they do not reflect the real world, kind of physics environment, much less scenario. And it's asking this thing to generate something that is going to look kind of like one of those action films, but it digested everything, and it's not able to discern reality from fantasy, and it just makes a total mess of it, right?
Yes, use a very good word to define it. That is exactly the word discern. Because even if you take the action movies, as you mentioned, those action movies, they keep a little bit of reality. The explosion is way too bigger than it should be. However, it's explosion. We understand that. It makes sense. It's not something totally different, as you mentioned, like motorcycles just flying while they should drive through the road.
Yes, exactly. There's a, I had an incident happen here at home about 2 or 3 months ago. I had an old barbecue. Um, I had been telling my oldest boy for a long time, can you please go clean the grease tray from the barbecue because it's gonna catch fire at some point. And yeah, Dad, I will. Okay. And so I go out there and make lunch. And I'm gonna make some burgers, and all of a sudden the barbecue's on fire. Right? Like it's the I'm thinking, well, it's not that much grease in the thing, so because it's got cleaned out. So I'll just take the food off because it's charcoal, and I'm just gonna move because and here in Florida we have like our lanai, like a screened in patio. We got the pool, and then the area where all the furniture is in sort of a covered overhang where the house is actually built over the patio, and that's where the barbecue was. So I'm like, well, maybe it's a good idea if I pull the barbecue out into the open area. The lanai is a good 20 feet above. The flame's not going to go that high, but it could go like 10, 12 feet.
Okay.
Calmly pull out the barbecue on fire out to the open area. And it's not going out. The flames just keep getting, and it's spreading. It's getting more horizontal across the barbecue. I'm like, it's probably a good idea if I take the propane tank off, right? And
Oh
so
my.
I take the propane tank off and take it off, and about 45 seconds later, whatever propane was in the hose going to the burners, because I turned the burners off very early, whatever propane that was in the hose explodes, but it's more like a shotgun blast. And I'm standing, I don't know, about 15, 20 feet away and in the right angle. And so everything goes shooting off like perpendicular to me, like away, like from me, either direction. And I'm like, if this was a movie, this is the crazy stuff that goes through your head, right? And when
Yeah.
you're in a situation like this, and you go, if this was a movie, there'd be like some big, huge ball of fire, and I would be, blown back, and I'd have a couple like smears of charcoal, like of black on my face, but I'd be all okay. But it would be, like this it would be this very theatrical looking explosion. And that's one of the things that was very evident in this AI, generated thing, is there's like a lot of spectacular looking stuff. Now, I use that as an example because it's so obvious, right?
Yeah.
But there has been studies that have been done over the last 6 months of people taking, because there's an implicit trust. This is generative AI, that is now generating code for you to solve a sophisticated problem that you need to be able to implement and roll out. And there have been studies where somebody's specifically put in a doable problem that would take a developer a couple hours to write, and they've fed that a couple hours to write, half a day to test, and then it would be a day of staging and then rollout. And then they did the same problem with a generative AI. One of the better ones, I'm assuming it's got to be like Open AI, or maybe it's the Google solution,
Okay.
um, and Gemini, right? And so they get the code in 5 seconds. They get the code. They get a solution code, a bunch of code spit out, 5 to 10 seconds. Copy, paste, build. Um, then the developer sits down and actually starts to go and trace through and do the debugging and validation. And they said that on average it takes about 4 to 10 times as long for the person to validate and fix the code that generative AI has produced to solve the solution, which means that the efficiency that you gained in writing the code is thrown right out the window when it comes to actually getting it to be production ready. Now, of course, some point it's going to be a much better opportunity, but what we call artificial intelligence right now is not artificial intelligence. It's just an enhanced generative Google search, right?
Yes, I see in a very similar way as you, because when we are talking about the idea behind AI, that is general intelligence, is very similar to us. We have data points, we have information, somehow we link them together to make sense, and based on that, we find solutions for the problems that we are facing. And this
Right.
happens every single day. Of course, we are not the best. We are pretty much just like the other animals on this planet, just getting the day done. The thing is that right now, as you just mentioned, what we are having is something that have a big amount of data. There's any kind of discern about things, and also is not learning anything and extracting anything from that data. It's pretty much taking that data point and say, okay, this is something that happened or that worked well in that situation, and I'll use the same solution even if this situation is slightly or totally different. This is what I know, this is what I have. There's no further processing in terms of see if does it make sense or not, if it fits well or not, is not there yet. And also this moves us back, for example, to games.
Mm-hmm.
I like games in a way that we back to Pong, the first commercial game that we had, and we see how it was back in that time and how are the games today. The way that evolved is dramatically, is incredible. The way that these games becomes not only complex but also the
Mm-hmm.
other components like the visuals, like the algorithms behind it, all of that over less than 40 years, if I'm not mistaken, is just
Yeah.
mind blowing what we did. And maybe AI will go in a similar direction. However, if I'm not mistaken, the AI models that we have, they are back to 70s, right? When we didn't have enough computer power.
So I would, yeah, I my if you're doing an equivalency, if you're doing that, I would even suggest now. So because I'm sure you know this, but the C language was created by Kernahan and Ritchie so that they could create the game Asteroids. That they wanted to build a language that was procedural, that was functions and had memory management and everything, and access to the hardware in such a way that they could create the game Asteroids. There right there is sort of indicative of how it's been for the last, yeah, like you said, like it's like 50 years, right? I think Kernahan and Ritchie created C in the early 70s or late 60s. I don't remember exactly when. I know that Bjarne Strustrup created C++ in the 80s. And so, but the whole idea was, we're the games are driving advancements. AI is, I think, at the state of place somewhere between where C and C++ was developed in terms of the maturity of the language. They're far enough along that they can do practical things, but nothing is ready for to essentially say, like, nobody would look at Leisure Suit Larry as a game and go, oh yes, rocking game, let's bring it out the way it was back in the 80s, right? And I think that we've looked at the potential for Gen AI and have rushed through excitement and exuberance. We've rushed things out, and even as we go back to the whole business question, the business wants to make money. Businesses have invested a huge sum of money into AI research now, especially over the last 3 years. And they need to show, because investors have become, over the last 50 years, have become incredibly impatient, right?
Yes.
The investors that invested in Microsoft in the late 70s only started to get their return on investment in the early 90s. Investors that bought into Amazon in 2000, I think, was when it was first put on the Nasdaq.
Mm-hmm.
Only really started to see returns in the early 2010s. Like somewhere around 2008 to 2012, and then of course cloud took off and everybody made a killing. Google really only started making huge amounts of money around that same time for investors, but it was like 10 years. These days, I mean, what you're looking at is, and the other phenomenon that happened is in the early 2010s, like late noughts, the 2006 to through 2016 and beyond, was an awful lot of people came out. There was a sort of aborted effort with the .com effort that crashed.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden everybody wanted to have a startup, and and so you would see a whole bunch of these startups that were taking advantage of the internet, and then everybody gets at the time it was like, I'm going to build a startup. It's going to be great. I'll be a CEO. I'll manage it, and I'll make money off the stock and off of revenues, and I'm going to be a billionaire. Then there came a time about 10 to 15 years ago where people were saying, well, I'm just going to create a startup. I'm going to put together a prototype or a MVP, and somebody will buy me, and that's how I'm going to make my millions. Google or Apple or Meta or whoever is going to buy me. Amazon will buy me, and I'm going to have to stick around for a couple of years, and then I'm going to just go and live the life. So it became less about advancing the technology. Now you even look at Sam, what's his name, Altman, from Open AI. I mean, he was involved in other startup activities and made a killing off of those. And OpenAI was the next thing that was going to put him into that next level, along with Elon and Bill Gates and Sergey and Larry and everybody. The problem is you get to that point where you're just creating the minimally viable product, and then you sell it, and the person who's buying is expecting it to put into production, into implementation. Like now, it worked really well with I worked for a subsidiary of Amazon called Woot when I was there, and Woot was an acquisition. It was a bunch of college kids that they had a great idea that put together a site that was essentially everybody's overstocked items. So whether it started off with the local computer shop, and they would have the bag of crap, which was essentially whatever surplus stuff that the computer shop knew they wouldn't be able to sell, like last year's video card or whatever, or like a bunch of tchotchkes, would just throw it in the bag of crap, and then they would put the bag of crap on sale in the morning once a week, and college kids would just go in, and it would, at the beginning, of course, it would like take a couple of days to sell out of these things, but it got to a point where literally, if you weren't there at the moment those things went live at 3 a.m. Pacific time, within 2 minutes they were gone. And there was, there was a limited number of these things, and they'd be gone. And other manufacturers and retailers and distributors recognized the value of that, and they started contributing their old stock items, because with the crazy U.S. tax laws, if you're going to get rid of your items, you can take that as a complete loss off your business. And Woot was able to essentially clear shit out, right? That was it. And then you see Costco has a return policy, which is, if you buy a TV, big, one of like huge screen TV or an appliance or something, and you're not happy with it, as long as it's less than 365 days since you purchased it, you can return it, and you're only going to have to take a 15% penalty for restocking. So people were going out and buying like $6,000-$7,000 big screen TVs, keeping the box, coming back, they would buy it, say January 1st, they would come back on December 28th or whatever and return the TV. And then Costco's sitting there with a whole bunch of TVs across the country and around the world, not knowing what to do with it. So they started clearing out TVs through Woot. And then Dyson, the vacuum cleaner company, doing the same thing. They would get, they were allowing people to trade in prior models of their vacuums and trade up into the next model. And then they would refurb and then sell those refurb items on Woot. That business model is fantastic for, and this rolls back to the whole premise at the beginning. Yes. Amazon bought Woot because Amazon gets a ton of returns. Amazon can now do all the stuff I talked about, essentially liquidate all the returns that they've got. They've cleaned them up, liquidate it, assign it to Woot. Woot will sell it. Amazon gets the tax loss. Woot is going to make a profit, but because the sales on Woot are so much lower than they are in Amazon, the tax bracket that Woot pays is so much less. So in the end, Amazon gains by having a subsidiary that is separate. That is a company that you buy, that you're able to put in place in production and start actively using it on day one. You buy OpenAI, or you buy, or you go and you license Claude from Anthropic, or you create, Gemini, or whatever other AI engine that you've got, and the expectation is based on past business practices. I've just bought it. I need to be able to go and turn it and make money off of it. Microsoft invested a lot of money in OpenAI, and now they've sort of implemented it. They've integrated it into Windows. Microsoft has learned better than most that you don't ship out immature software. So it does not have the same degree of integration. It's integrated, but they're not allocating the same degree of responsibility. It's a part of Windows, or it's a part of some service on Azure.
Yes, and we have a very big recent learning, right, that just happened between Microsoft and CrowdStrike, because they are tightly integrated. This may not happen anymore.
Bingo. And I am willing to bet that when somebody actually, because they're going to not come out with the reason why it happened, why the worldwide outage happened on CrowdStrike for 6 to 12 months. But mark my words, when they do come out with it, they're going to say that the reason that it happened was not just because some developer didn't test a patch on a Friday afternoon. That's what the initial reasoning was. They're trying to pin it on an individual. What will be the real cause is that CrowdStrike or whoever decided that they're going to put this patch in, ask OpenAI or some generative AI routine to generate the patch to fix this issue, and that they were in such a hurry to release it that they didn't do the due diligence to test it. And it's going to be the fault of the AI, because the AI does not have, and now I'm going to circle all the way back where we say like deductive reasoning, right? The AI does not have deductive reasoning. As a human, when we get a problem, our brains are so quick that not only do we come up with a solution very quickly, our brain has actually gone through several options extremely quickly, so much so that we haven't even really considered them, that they're not consciously being considered. The ones that are most feasible based on the knowledge that we have and our ability to apply that knowledge,
Mhm.
or come up with a new novel way of being able to use that knowledge, is the brain has filtered things out to the ones that are the most likely to actually be the right solution, not just spitting something out based on generative on things that are generated from our archives of information that we've just sort of glommed together.
Yes, it's not something radical, and it's not also something that you just have a reflex, right? It's something that you think about it. As you mentioned, there are the conscient part and there are the not conscient part, and that comes together as a solution.
Exactly. And so until, like, there needs to come, and I'm starting to see a lot of investors and a lot of the technology gurus and a lot of people who are not necessarily aligned, like working for one of the companies, but are outside looking in, who are experts, who like the academia, who are now coming in and saying, hey, everybody's finally coming to their senses, and they're realizing that this is not the savior of the world, right? That we're going to, and I think part of it now that's happening is like, you've got over the last like 3 4 weeks, you've had the CrowdStrike issue that came out.
Mhm.
Now you're starting to see a lot of the selfish ambitions and greed of the individuals that are shareholders or board members and C-suite of the companies who have laid off people. Now you're starting to see the reflection of that in the unemployment rate ticking up 0.3%. You realize, 0.3%, that's huge. That is a huge uptick. It's actually more, because we were at 3.9% unemployment the last time in July for June and prior. And we've just ticked up. There's been 10% more people going on the unemployment rolls than there were there
The year
10%
before.
more in July than there were in June.
Yes, and as you just mentioned, this is giving us the impression that it's becoming more risky for these companies to run the operations. It means the daily stuffs.
I think it's a reflection of disenchantment with this belief that this is the savior, and it's going to be like a big influx of money coming in as a result, that we're going to save all these operational expenses by this singular capital expense that happened over the last 3 years, is now going to result in this long-term operational savings that we're going to get because we've just laid off 20% of our workforce. Right now, you've laid off 20% of your workforce. Those are the people that are usually around to clean up the mess that happens, right? and then there's the compound sort of, now we're going to see the dominoes start to tip, because people who are still working full-time for companies are actually feeling really anxious about their roles, because they could lose their job just about any time. So that means their loyalty to the company is significantly reduced. There's no loyalty on behalf of the companies to keep those people around. So therefore, there was this talk about quiet quitting. Well, no, they're not quiet quitting, but they're actively looking for something else that they're going to be able to, like, they'll come in fresh on, that's going to be the next big thing. They're going to make a big increase in their salary compensation, and due to the understanding that they're on a unlimited time budget, right?
Yes, as we see, they are adding the risk and, of course, the lack of loyalty to the wage,
Yes.
which also makes sense because this is a quite big shift, at least in my view, in the recent decades. We do have, and we used to value the loyalty. And of course, there are a lot of people putting many hours into the company. And what had happened recently, right, with these very big waves of layoffs, is showing that unfortunately the companies doesn't think like that, and they are not valuing their loyalty. So why do the workers would do that?
Right, exactly. And that is actually what's going to erode the economy further, right? Um, you a lot of people who are curious and who've gone to go take a look at my LinkedIn profile know that I do interview and career coaching. And what I've been hearing from people is that there are people that I talk to who are actually in positions of leadership. They're directors, they're VPs and managers and whatnot, and they're actively looking for their next role. And then, of course, companies have and teams have decided that they're going to increase the bar, raise the bar for what the requirement is for each given role. So somebody who's in, say, a director role is less involved in hands-on development and coding on a day-to-day basis than somebody who's an individual contributor who happens to be a senior or a staff or whatever. But when they go to apply for a director role, which is essentially would be a lateral move, the coding test that they're being given is something that would be commensurate to what a staff or a principal individual contributor would be, to somebody who has not been in that type of role for 3, 5, 7 years. And so what you're finding is even the bigger employers are looking for almost that person who was the CTO, like startup of their own company, who's had to wear all the hats. And even over the last week, there have been articles. There's this dichotomy that's happening, as one side of the equation is saying, you know what, OpenAI, AI/ML, neural networks is immature. It's not ready to take on the responsibilities that we're expecting it to be able to do today. It's going to be, many years away because of all sorts of constraints. We don't have the algorithm yet to do deductive reasoning, right?
Yes, the way to say that we need people, we need time, we
Right.
need investment, and is not something that we were wondering to replace all of you guys right now. Oh, we still need you.
Right.
One
But
more
there's this,
round.
like, that's the academics that are saying, look, you guys need to get a grip. And then there's the other side that are saying, you know what? We don't need project and program managers. We're going to have AI do it all.
Mm.
And because the assumption is that a program or a project manager or a technical program or technical project manager is just checking boxes off on an Excel spreadsheet, which is why they're asking these crazy technical questions of technical program and project managers, because they want it's like, prove to me that you're more than just that. And it's becoming this is now starting to turn into something that's across the board, where generalists in any of the disciplines, whether you're a QA engineer or whether you're a developer or systems engineer, et cetera, web developer, there's an expectation that you should know it all, right?
Yes. Moving on this direction that you just mentioned, I had read two things actually. One of them is pretty much saying that, yes, exactly as you said, the companies are expecting way more from all the professionals because there are a huge instability which they cannot guarantee the day of tomorrow. So once you have more abilities, You may be able to drive inside the company and, of course, catch up with other things that you're going to be doing. This is one thing. The other thing is telling that this is already backfiring
Yeah.
because people is burning out.
Yes. But that is a consistent thing that happens every time that we go into a downturn in the cycle. You, um, I know from the last employer that I worked at, they let go 20% of their staff, and then the communication is to the remaining staff is like, we still have the same goals that we want to achieve. You need to make that happen, which means that you're now working 120% of your capacity or more, right? Because a lot of people were already stretched 110, 115%. So now they're being asked to go 130, 135% of their capacity instead of working 40, 44 hours a week like they used to say 50 years ago. Now they've been working already 50 hours a week, putting in, I know personally, I would be at work for 9-10 hours a day, come home and I'd still be on email or I'd be working on documentation in the evening while I'm sitting around with a family after having made dinner and cleaned up and I've got the television on. I'm still spending time working until 11 or 12 o'clock at night, or fielding calls from companies' leaders who are in a different time zone. Leadership is like they're oblivious to time, it seems, and so they'll call you at like 11:30 at night going, hey, I want to talk to you about this. I think I've got this great solution for you to consider. It's like, it's 11:30 at night right here where I'm at. I'm supposed to get up at 6 tomorrow to take my kid to school. So but that doesn't matter, right? And so everybody was already kind of stretched pretty thin, and now we're being asked to go even further. The expectation that, like, when you as a new hire, and it's going to be the way, no matter where I land, that's going to be the expectation, is that day one I'm going to be expected to start to make a big impact for several reasons, right? And it's going to be, seniority level, experience level, how much salary we're paying you. We're giving you this flexibility of the flex schedule, and also you should be really excited and stoked because this is a new opportunity for you, right? The gift package, and so yeah, as workers, we're all looking at this and going like, how the hell did we get so screwed by this? And then from an economy perspective, like I said, this is cyclical. This happens every X number of years. It happened in 2008 and 9 when we had the financial crash, the banks almost going out of business and having to get bailed out. I'm sorry?
The housing bubble.
The housing bubble, and then the banks, and then the companies are opportunistic because Microsoft, that was their first ever layoff. They laid off 5,000 people. Right? It's like, wow. And now, like, for the last 20 months, almost, actually it's like 2 years, because the first layoffs that happened were in the summer of 2022 when Airbnb and others started laying people off. And then you had Meta go through the big layoff in the fall, or at least announce it. And Musk let go 60% of Twitter when he took over. And not to be outdone, all the other companies said, they did that? Well, we better do some too. And so you started seeing 12, 15, 18% layoffs at all the companies. Google let a bunch of people go. And the excuse was, well, we overhired. Well, no, you didn't overhire, because nobody ever gets all the resources that they need according to the plans that they've laid out for that fiscal year or for the next 5 years. Nobody overhires. That's all bullshit. I'm going to call that out straight out. It's bullshit. What it is that all these other companies are laying people off, and the shareholders are going, hey, look what they did. What are you going to do? You haven't made it, you're not making the same amount of money that you were making, 10 years ago. We're not getting the same returns on our investment. And then the companies are essentially shamed into letting people go. And then a lot of them being, founders or principal shareholders that are benefiting by it are actually saying, well, yeah, I'm going to do the same because I'm going to benefit in the end. I mean, you look at all the names in the industry, and their gross amount of wealth that they have increased like 5x since the early 2010s. Minimum 5x. And so that plays all back into this. Now you've got an opportunity. You see, like, you've just been investing all these years into generative AI, into AI ML, and hiring all these data scientists and algorithm experts, being able to take statistical mathematics and turn it into some kind of application that would generate answers for you. And you've invested all this money, and now it's like time for payback, right? Satan's coming around to collect his soul. And so now you're seeing this thing happen. And then, of course, just like selling your soul to Satan, in the end, you start looking at it going, hey, really, I got screwed, right? Satan played the long game, right?
Yes, as you mentioned, right, is a cycle. It happens through the economy. There are longer cycles and shorter ones, and by the end is as we see is a bloodbath. And in this bloodbath, the investors, they already see that the profitability of the company is decreasing
Yeah.
quarter over quarter, and they say, okay, guys, we understand that you cannot make as much as you used to do, as you mentioned, so we're going to squeeze something. And that's exactly when they go in a very sensitive point that is about people, about workers, when you start to laying off people to, pay more dividends or profits over the quarter for the investors that, they are putting their money at risk into this company, while you put you and your family and your labor at risk as
Yeah.
well. But
Yeah.
as we talked, how did we get that screwed, right? Because we don't have much of a choice. Things just happen and we deal with it.
But you can see it in the U.S. Of course, now I'm going to bring in a whole huge kettle of worms. You can see it in the U.S. elections, right? I don't believe there's anybody, except for the people who've drunk the Kool-Aid. I don't think there's anybody of any reasonable intelligence that actually believes that returning Donald Trump to the White House is a wise move. The only reason, and if you go back and go watch what's his name? He's on HBO. He comedian that interviews people. Bill Maher. Go watch Bill Maher from three Fridays ago, and he talks to Pete Buttigieg. Pete Buttigieg is a Rhodes Scholar, one of the smartest people in a position of leadership today. And he and Bill Maher asked him, he said, so, like, this doesn't make sense. Why are Elon Musk, why are Peter Thiel and all these guys backing Donald Trump? They are, in some regards, I mean, less so Musk now, but I also think Musk is putting it on. They're essentially were people who took advantage of a much more liberal government program type financed industry in Silicon Valley, that they benefited by government handouts. Now they're backing a guy who essentially is doing everything he can to cut all government spending, cut taxes, and essentially let the market economy run rampant and go to its natural conclusion. And Pete Buttigieg's answer was, hey, we're overcomplicating things. What you have is a bunch of rich guys who want to be more rich. They're going to back the horse that's going to say, I'm going to lower your corporate and your personal tax rates, and I'm going to reduce the number of tax brackets on everybody so that the everybody up to $400,000 is going to have to pay more taxes, but everybody above is going to see a huge cut, which is exactly what is being proposed. Then, of course, you're eliminating the Department of Education, which means that now the disparity between the haves and the have-nots is even going to grow worse, and we're going to start looking for more overseas labor to come in to fill the gap that our country can't fill for ourselves. Right?
Yes.
We already see like this talk about bringing manufacturing back into the country. There was a lot of talk of how Donald Trump is forcing companies to bring manufacturing back in from Mexico, Canada, over like China and everything through tariffs. They did not do that. What they did do is they made the American public suffer, because by adding tariffs, no company is going to be paying that out of their pocket. That is actually added on top of the cost of the goods itself. So now you may or may not agree. But I'm going to look at one singular point of the current administration in the Infrastructure Act and the CHIPS Act. They are investing money in companies saying you will get money if you set up high-tech facilities in this country, which incidentally improves national security, because no longer is our advanced technology going to be accessible outside of the electronic and physical boundaries of the United States. There will still be people out there who are going to reverse engineer things, but reverse engineering gets a lot of stuff wrong. If we bring all of our manufacturing, high-tech manufacturing, into the United States, and that is a really long-term play, you're only now starting to see, like you're in the last year or so, you're starting to see Intel and other companies building the facilities that are going to be manufacturing these products. You're not going to see the benefits for those until like 2026, 2027. So this impatience that is now prevalent across society in trying to get the economy kickstarted and going better, this impatience is now going to cost us dearly, because what's going to happen is that funding is going to be either capped or cut off entirely. Those companies are going to just not continue building and bringing manufacturing here, and the tax cuts are going to happen anyways. So you're now just making things worse. And this really is all tied together with this idea of how generative AI is going to save companies money by laying off resources. How if we take all of our manufacturing overseas, we're going to be able to take advantage of the pesos and the pennies on the dollar that we're paying workers in Mexico. Well, not anymore, because the Mexicans gotten smart, but in Indonesia, in Vietnam, and even China's starting to get smart, because the workers are starting to say, hey, wait a minute, for the last 20 years, we've been getting screwed, and we're being asked to work so many hours that people are killing themselves. And that is all going to turn around. The net result is, of course, now instead of paying like $899 for an iPhone, if I don't know, because I'm an Android guy, but instead of paying $899 for my Android, I'm probably going to have to pay $999 or $1099 for my Android. But I'm going to have a resurgence of the middle class, right?
Yes.
And there does need to be a serious overhaul of the tax system. Oh, there's so many things that need to be overhauled. Our Supreme Court needs to be, our whole Supreme Court, and how we appoint, how we pick judges and things, and our ethical model for them has to be completely overhauled. There has to be an overhaul of, and this happens in other places, but we need to dignify construction. We need to dignify manufacturing, like manufacturing skills, tradespeople. We need to dignify
Mhm.
the right now. The only people that are dignifying those skills are the people themselves, because as a society that values STEM, unfortunately, yes, we want everybody to be a STEM worker, but we're still going to be reliant on labor that may or may not be coming in illegally into the country to build this stuff, or to go pick our vegetables, or go construct our homes, right?
Yes, this is something very, very interesting and is also very complex. Why? Because there are jobs people just don't want to do. And
Exactly.
there are someone else that are willing to do that job. It's not a problem for them, and they will do.
But
And
you
that's
hear, but I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt you for a second, because I think that this is an important point that you're making, is that there are people here in the States, people that I worked with, that I went out on a morale event, from my last job, where they're saying, I don't want illegals coming in and taking jobs. I think that they should all be thrown out of the country. And it's like, and it's such a difficult tightrope to walk, to say, to be the advocate of the other side and say, yeah, but who's going to go pick the strawberries and the apples and the pears and the avocados, and who's going to build that? Like, who built the house that you're in today? I can guarantee you, like I knew, like I was in Washington State for 20 years. We were in the Bay Area for 2.5 years. We've been here now in Orlando for 4 years. I can go to any of the construction sites there, and all I'm going to hear is Spanish. And that is not a prejudicial statement. That is, I'm just stating a fact of reality. That when we bought our house from a builder, and I went on site just to go, because I come from an immigrant family, and so when I was younger, my father and I and my uncle and my cousin, we built the house that they lived in for 26 years or something. I actually went there hammering nails, putting studs in, roughing out plumbing, putting a roof on. I know all this stuff. I worked it when I was 15, 16 years old. I worked hard work. I've harvested tobacco when I was in college, because I had to put myself through college. I planted trees in Northern Ontario, where, like, 50 miles away from where I was planting, in the middle of nowhere, some guy got eaten by a black bear, because it happened to be a very dry year and there were no blueberries around for it to eat. So he ate the guy, attacked and ate the guy. There's Nobody wants to work, because we've made it an indignity to work physical labor. There's no honor. I could probably walk around my neighborhood here and talk to people that are, because I'm 60, I can talk to people that are like 40, 45, and ask them what they did in college. And they either had, well, so I mean, if they're lucky, they got a full ride from, like, scholarship. But they've either had their parents pay for it all, and mortgaged their own life savings and retirement funds to put their kids through college. They've they took advantage of McDonald's, these wonderful education programs at McDonald's, Starbucks, Chick-fil-A. I'm not a big fan of their politics, but Chick-fil-A has this amazing scholarship program that all these companies started doing for the kids. But nobody went, I am so screwed, I can't pay for college. I guess I'm going to have to go and dig ditches, or I'm going to have to go, because I mean, there was a summer where I was doing casual labor and I literally went into we dug a hole in the ground with shovels and spades for a guy who was paying us, I think at the time it was like $4 an hour, so he could put a pool in, right? We actually excavated by hand. He did not want to spend the money on a backhoe. He was going to do it all himself, and then hired a bunch of high school kids to come in and do the work. And I did that in the middle of like pouring rain and thunderstorms, because he had a schedule that he wanted to keep to, and standing in knee deep water as we're digging out this pool, 8 foot, depth, down to 10 feet to be able to account for the concrete. And nobody does that. Nobody, my son, I'm not going to rag on him, but my son got a job at McDonald's, probably one of the cushiest jobs that anybody could ever have, because he was the only native English speaker in the restaurant, or one of the only ones. And they stuck him on the drive-through window because he could, he was able to communicate. And he was like upset because, he had to deal with people all day. And then, left that job and went to another job that was harder yet. And then went to another job that was harder yet. And when he would come back and say, no, I can't do this anymore, it's like, I think you need to toughen up a bit, right? You can't, you can't achieve anything in life without suffering, to some extent. The people that achieve their life without suffering have already been given the equivalent of $40 million loan to start up their business, or have their parents ran a diamond mine in South Africa and had a huge amount of money that they could draw from to purchase the company that they're now like a founder of, right? The people that didn't suffer came from privilege, and they didn't need to suffer because they were financed to do it. Whereas anybody else most other people that I know, even like Chris that I worked for at Life 360, was in the Marines. He went and served, came back and started Life 360 after the hurricane in 2009 that hit New Orleans. And I'm sorry, I can't remember that. And I should go search it, but I can't. I don't want to do that. But he started that Life 360 app. They did it in a weekend and published it specifically so that people could find their people in the aftermath of the hurricane, where people are sitting on lawn chairs on their roofs because the dam broke, the levees broke, and the whole city was flooded. And
Yes.
they were giving this app away for free so that people could find their people. And it became, now it's like of course, we've been using Life 360 since 2009. But he, even though he's a little bit quirky of a quirky guy, he did start from zero, right? He did start that. Him and Alex Hanno started that company from scratch and put it out. And there are people out there who do understand, but it gets back to, and I wrote an article which I know you read, Nay. I wrote an article on LinkedIn about what I heard from one of my clients, a director she's screening people for roles at her company. And I'm not going to mention the company name, just like I'm not going to mention who she is. But the requirement is essentially that this person, they even will have a tech screen where they lead people through, like every time you hit like in each of the tiny little milestones, when you hit a success, it then gives you the next hint to get the next milestone. And you go on and go on and on until you finish the problem. And it's laid out for people who can, who have like 2 brain cells. And so, she was saying that she interviewed person. She was really anxious to talk. She goes, I just interviewed a guy who's like 27 years old. He's he left Microsoft in January
Mm-hmm.
after 5 years, and he thinks that his shit doesn't stink, right? He comes in with an attitude and starts to essentially ask me, so what's in it for me? Like, why would I want to come and work here? Well, I mean, you've been unemployed for now it's 8 months.
Mm-hmm.
You're squatting in one of your boomer parents or your Joneser parents, rental places, and you don't have any prospects on the horizon. So what's the negative? I mean, like, you're going to come in, you're going to learn new technology. We're going to ask you to work, but there was a statement made in this, like, in retrospect of her experience with this person, was that a lot of the young people want don't think that they need to put the effort in, or they've, and other articles I've read is like these Gen Zers and Gen Y people have seen their parents, this is where we really tie everything up, get abused by their employers, working all these extra hours, the demands on their time being put up like over and above what their original capabilities are. And they don't want to live that lifestyle. They've actually come out and said, I'm going to be satisfied with like whatever minimal salary I get, as long as I actually establish my own boundaries for what work-life balance is. I want to live life before I die. And go ahead, you're going to say.
This does not justify the attitude, but again, we see that maybe this person passed through a lot of things that he saw happening to the family or to the parents, to the relatives, in a way that they was not available. They could not just live the moment and enjoy the family. They was constantly working. They was loyal. They get laid off. They put
Yep.
themselves in a financial struggle. And all of these things happen. So the person already come like, okay, I would not like to do like them, but I will not also behave like them.
Right. But
That
there's
is
there's
that came what you said about people somehow they are behaving in an entitled way, which
yes.
you and I agree that's not the way. You need a job, you got a job, you do the job, you're back home, but your attitude is important.
It's the essence of how combative society has become. You know, everything starts with I'm getting screwed. That's the essential statement that defines an individual's mental state. I'm getting screwed. And so they carry that attitude into work. The employer or the manager and the employer, the company is saying, we're getting screwed by our employees, right? The shareholder, I'm getting screwed. I'm not seeing the net gains that I'm entitled to and accustomed to seeing. And bubbles even up beyond that. It's like everybody looks at the government. We're getting screwed, right? And they're not looking at nobody looks at the facts. The employer's not looking at the fact that you can't lay people off and still expect the same degree of productivity. Employers should be also looking, going, I can't put any kind of automation in and expect it to replace people directly. The employee can't look and go, you know what, I want to only work 40 hours a week, but I also want to make 300K a year, right?
I just
And
would like to add a kind of joke in here, right? Employees should not expect the employees to build the automation solution to replace them.
exactly. But this is all comes back to the I'm getting screwed, and then the I'm getting screwed now extends down to out beyond that to political situation where you actually have a political leader going, you're getting screwed, right? Even though it's been decades that the government's been screwing people over because of really poor policy choices. It just so happens that we have very short memories as individuals, and we don't realize that 4 years ago we were loading up box cars and body bag. We were loading up box cars with body bags and refrigerated box cars with body bags, as somebody fucked up the handling of how do you handle a pandemic. And I'm not pointing, it's not just simply one person that screwed it up, because it's a generalized screw up, right?
Yes, it's the system, right? The system failed these people.
Globally, the system failed. And we saw a repeat of the Spanish flu. The point is that, you know, somebody says, hey, you were better off under me 4 years ago. No, we weren't. Actually, let's show and when somebody says that, now I actually think that there should be real-time fact checking that goes on whenever an individual says something. Maybe that's where AI should actually be used, is as somebody is opening their big fat trap, whether it's one side or the other, there should be like an AI going, nope, actually that's wrong. Here are the facts. And, you know, whether it's Biden saying that, you know, something, whatever, because he comes out with his own set of false truths as well, or whether it's Trump or Vance, or whether it's Kamala Harris, or whether it's and I'm going to go into whether it's Lula or Bolsonaro, or whether it's Orban or Putin or Xi or whoever. Sorry?
Polarization.
Exactly. Whether it's whenever somebody comes out with something, there should be some sort of immediate fact check available on the media saying, actually, that is wrong, or that is a partial truth. This is the truth. This is what is exaggerated, and provide people with the real information. That is where I think that AI has a real niche. In terms of, because we can't rely on media anymore, because media is polarized. Media is making money based on number of eyeballs that they're getting on their sites, and whoever the owner of the media happens to be supporting. The people themselves, of course, we can't trust. The message that's being delivered is so twisted into such terrible distortions. And history, while we should focus on STEM, but you know what, history is really important too, because nobody remembers 1933 and the Reichstag fire and how Hindenburg handed the keys to the kingdom to Hitler. Nobody remembers that. Nobody remembers how Stalin killed 80 million people in Russia. Nobody remembers all, like, and then this is on, you can even go to the other side. Nobody remembers that the Democrats were actually pro-slavery, and also pro Jim Crow and pro segregation and everything prior to the 50s. You know, nobody remembers that it was the GOP who were in favor of emancipation, but that was essentially emancipation to some degree was in order to be able to gain more votes, to be able to get more votes for future elections. Nobody remembers that Andrew Johnson, favorite of Trump, was actually a complete asshole, right? And rolled back an awful lot of the changes that were made that were intended to bring about emancipation, were to bring about the Reconstruction and everything. I'm Canadian and I know this stuff. What the hell? Why don't Americans know this stuff?
As you mentioned before, because the budget for the education has been widely decreasing year after year.
decreasing, and there is not going to be a federal Department of Education if one party takes over. There's not the DOJ is not going to be independent anymore. They're going to be owned by whoever is the president, and that will give them the ability to go after the political opponents. That, my friend, that's Hungary. That's Russia.
Yes, Robert, you brought a lot to us to think about it, to reflect, and to, of course, get ourselves bet on it. And what would be your advice to the young generation that, just catch it, the train already running?
Maybe the last time we talked about this, and I'm just going to repeat it. One is education, consistent. Do not stop learning, right? I will confess that prior to 2014, 2015, I was not a political individual. I was completely apolitical. I wanted to have nothing to do with American politics. I wanted to even have nothing to do with Canadian politics or Brazilian politics, or I wanted to stay politically agnostic. But there comes a time when the necessity strikes. And in the technology field, this is now going to be the broad statement. In the technology field, technology moves faster than learning can possibly keep up with, because it's so broad and is so in so many different pies. But you need to, as a young person who wants to catch the train while it's going, while it's racing down the track, you need to identify what are those main things that are driving technology. For the moment, AI is the thing. AI is still going to be the thing, but I also think that AI is going to start getting tied into quantum computing and qubits and at that point, when we start to really build quantum computers out to the point where PCs were in the late 1980s, when we get quantum computing to that point in evolution, that is when AI is going to become a much more deductive creature, because it's not a binary anymore. There's the Schrodinger's cat part of the qubit thing that will force there to be deductive reasoning. And we're learning about that right now. So learning about quantum computing and what does the qubit mean to logic. Security. I mean, security is I just read an article this morning saying that 70% of the world is still operating on Windows 10, even though the Chinese found a penetration vector. They found an exploit last year that they were able to go and take advantage of for all the companies and employees that were in Taiwan, and be able to go and access unfettered, unencrypted information from individuals' computers at any company around the world. So security, learning security, update your Windows to Windows 11. If you're going to stay on Windows, update it to Windows 11, damn it. Make the world safer. And then finally, learn about world politics. World politics is so complex. I met with a really good friend of mine last night who's a musician down in Hollywood, Florida. I had to drop off my wife and kids at the airport down in Miami, and I stopped in, and we talked about, and he's Jewish ancestry. In fact, he said his mom went to school with Benjamin Netanyahu, which was like a real shock for me, right? But a lot of the situations that are happening in the world are so profoundly complex because either they were never really done well to begin with, like the whole creation of the Israeli state of Israel, and what the British did in order to populate Israel was an atrocity unto itself. And those grievances will never ever be redressed until such point that the ruling party, the ruling people in Israel recognize that because they're there, they now own those grievances, right? And the British should, they absolutely need to get their nose in there and clean things up, like for themselves, actually do something to compensate. Um, and the Arab states need to be 100% involved in helping to redress this in such a way that everybody gets their space, their fair share, and can live, allow a few generations to pass so that people can then actually put aside, can say these grievances, these things are valid that happened in the past, but we're now able to live copacetically in some sort of a very anxious peace. But give people their piece of land, right? The Ukraine situation. If you say we're going to withdraw support for Ukraine, and this is something like we're really diving into something here, but if it's like a bully, a schoolyard bully, you let a bully push you around once, twice, you give him your lunch money, you let him beat you up in front of his buddies and give them everybody the opportunity to laugh at you, they're going to continue coming at you. And once they've conquered you, they're going to go after the next weak person and the next one.
Behave.
Exactly. Now, what you need to do is you need to stop the behavior. Now, of course, my wife and I, with regards to kids, kid pushes you around, she says, go tell the teacher. That works at that moment, but then later on, you're marked for life. My advocacy is, if you're starting to get pushed around and you punch the guy in the nose, punch your bully in the nose really hard. Even if it's the last punch you get in there, but you've actually gained some respect, and that individual is not going to beat you up then, and they're not going to really bother you because they know you're going to stand up to them and you're going to make them look like an idiot.
This reminds me something I read in a book called Ender's Game.
Yeah, that's a long time ago that I read that. Yes.
Yes. So in Ender's Game, there's something similar to that, and is related to strategy. And he explained it exactly as you said. He beat really hard someone. Of course, he was defending himself. He did not start that. And he beat really hard exactly because of this. He said, if I do not do like this, he will come back for revenge or anything else.
Yep.
But if you do it like this so hard, he won't back ever again, because I beat him in many different battles that is yet to come.
Right. And that's an interesting book. I also watched the movie. It's in the end, the question is like these creatures are just struggling to survive themselves. They misinterpreted that they were, but there's a difference between misinterpretation and outright aggression, right? It's not like the Russian people are going to necessarily suffer a terrible fate if they don't invade Ukraine. But it does mean that if Ukraine loses, that next on the list is going to be Moldova. Next on the list is going to be the Baltic states. Next on the list is going to be Poland, and the Slovakia and the Czech Republic. Hungary's already they've anticipated that this is something that they're going to see anyways, so they've cozied up to, Orban is cozied up to Putin.
Yes, and this is something similar to what you just mentioned about the state of Israel. Those places, they have a very long history, which we are not fully aware.
Right.
So we are talking about, for example, Ukraine and Russia, and also, I'm not saying that it's similar, but also there's a long history between China and Taiwan, which we are
Yes.
not fully aware. So we are kind of outsiders on it. We don't want and we don't like what is happening there. No one. However, we also don't know how this could be solved because only them are able to do it in the way that they see it fits.
Taiwan and China is even more complex just because of I mean, for anybody who's not aware, and I'm sure a lot of people are, is a lot of when the Cultural Revolution happened, uh, a lot of the imperialists went to Taiwan and declared themselves an independent nation, but yet Taiwan as an island has always been part of China. And so the assertion is, and this is where the world themselves have put themselves in a bind, because nobody has come out and said we support Taiwan being an independent nation, yet from the actions that they're taking, promoting the military exercises, the joint military exercises that are happening in the South China Sea, and so on. From the actions they're taking, they're actually making the assertion that Taiwan is an independent nation, but yet China, nobody's coming back and saying you have no right to your assertion that Taiwan is a part of the Democratic Republic of China. And so, whereas with Ukraine has been an independent nation since the fall of the USSR in the early 90s, and being a Lithuanian Baltic heritage, I remember that. I remember watching it happen, and for Putin to say that there's a threat with regards to the Baltics are now part of NATO. Poland is a part of NATO. You've got a lot of what was part of the Soviet bloc now are a part of NATO because of Charter 5. Is it Charter 5 or Charter 12? It's Charter 5, isn't it? Where
Not remember it.
but it's the whole thing of like, you attack one nation, you attack us all.
Yes.
And so, Russia is seeing Georgia as a nation trying to split off and join NATO. And there's a threat internally. There's a threat to Russia that NATO is going to essentially encircle, because Japan is looking like it's going to become part of NATO, and same with South Korea is another discussion point, part of NATO. And so a lot of the nations that we've considered adversaries over all these decades, over the last 3/4 of a century, are very threatened by it. And so Taiwan is more complex. The complexity of the Middle East situation is the sad repercussion of the Middle East is that the majority of the people who are doing the suffering are the people who are not affiliated with either Hamas or with the ruling party in Israel or Hezbollah. Everybody else, all the civilians, are the ones that are suffering. But
Yes.
yet it's this militant few who, through some fashion that they've twisted the words of their holy scripts, they've now become these. It's the divine right of God now that they are able to do this, and that they're absolved of all this because they are killing people who are not part of their spiritual, their religious group.
The word religion, right? Because that would be about religion. or am I
Totally. Well, so I mean, I with Hezbollah and Hamas, I don't hear anything specific to any one sect of religion. I mean, they're being supported by Iran, which means that I think they're Sunnis. It's a and the Sunnis and Shiites have been fighting amongst themselves in Iraq, right, for a long time. But the Sunnis, Shiites, and all the different sects of Islam are all hate the Jews, and so it's just what it is, right? It's and it comes down to the different clans, the Arabs versus the Israelites.
Yes, and those are another very, very long story.
That's the irony, is like there's actually three groups of people, and the Christians are the least amount of problems, but the Christians outside of the Holy Land are sticking their nose in and causing more problems than with various policy changes. But that's another story altogether. But to go back to the original concept of like what would I advise, learning the geopolitical history, learning the complexities of where us as a human society is at, and how ugly we are to each other, and what the situation is. I don't believe there has been a time in my lifetime that I can remember, because before I was born, after I was conceived, or around the time I was conceived, was when the Bay of Pigs was going on, and that was a really tense time. I don't believe that I don't believe that we've been at any more tense time since then than where we are right now. It is a really, really, really tense, and the more that people learn about stuff, the more that people understand, at least have an inkling as to the root causes of where the hatreds are all coming from, and the aggressions, the more that we can actually find a mutual solution and work towards something that will give us a détente at the very least. And of course,
Understand.
learn your technology, learn all that stuff. Don't stop reading. Read as much as you can with domestic American politics. Read the policies. Know that the irony of hearing about how Kamala Harris is a radical liberal is just absolute bullshit, because everybody who lives in California knows that she's actually a center, not just moderate. She's a very hard center, a prosecutor who went hard after corruption and after crime, and
So
it's
news are
laughable.
fear.
I'm sorry.
The news are selling fear, saying that she's something else.
Well, I mean, they're just amplifying something that one person is saying about two people now. The line, and then of course everybody knows that the vice president doesn't set policy; it's the president. So, like, criticizing the administration for the policies set by the president of this administration, what it should do is it should actually add to setting new policy that's going to be more agreeable across the board, because we should be working towards collaboration across the middle, right? Instead of further inflaming the divisions. But like a lot of the things talking about the Kamala Harris as being a radical liberal is a lie, and a lot of people talking about how Donald J. Trump is a conservative Christian is an outright lie. Outright lie. And so put both of those things aside. Go read what the hell, like everything that's behind in terms of policy, behind what the two of them stand. Do a apples to apples comparison. Assess how you individually and as a society will benefit or suffer
Mm-hmm.
based on the various policies. And just like we do in our decision making when we go to pick a solution, weigh up the pros and cons and pick the side that has the most pros.
Understood. So, guys, you that are listening now to Robert, do not allow yourself to be lied to. Is that right, Robert?
Absolutely. And there's so many lies that are going out there right now that it's hard. They call it the Gish Gallop. Have you ever heard of that?
No, I didn't.
The Gish Gallop is when somebody's when you have somebody who throws so many divergent accusations at you. Some are lies, some are truths, some are half truths, but they throw so many at an individual that the individual is overwhelmed. They do not have an ability to actually pick one and respond to it. And what we're seeing is the Gish Gallop. We're seeing all these accusations that are being flung at people, and there is no opportunity to be able to address each one of those accusations. And this is where I said we should have real-time truth telling, real-time fact checking.
I'm familiar with that. I think we all saw that for the first time in the previous elections, right?
We've been seeing it since 2015.
2015, right? Someone just
Yes.
throws lies on top of lies, and they are not the person with a helmet, right? And not
Yes.
being
And
able to
and
answer.
and the other thing is I read Robert Reich is got a great blog that he posts on Substack, and he talks about how in 2015 and 16 that the Democratic candidate at the time was too polite to answer the brutal accusations and the lies and the rude accusations, the rude remarks that were being made by Donald Trump. So instead of responding in kind and putting actually throwing it back and putting them off balance, they were allowing this stuff to continue. And so when some, just like a bully, when you allow it to continue, it will continue, and it'll get amplified and accelerate.
Mm-hmm.
And so now what you're seeing is like you're seeing an ad campaign that distinctly the like it's like, say it to my face. I love that. Say it to my face. The prosecutor versus the felon, right? And you're
Okay.
starting to see the game of Thrones changing, right? Is becoming dirt for dirt. But again, learn enough about the real background, the real history, to be able to discern the lies from the truth globally, but discern the lies from the truth, and you will help to make society a better place.
Understood. Seek for the truth.
It's what Buddha said, isn't it?
Yes, it is. So, Robert, I would like to thank you very much for your time. It has been a really amazing talk to you. I got to learn a lot. I'm sure that who is listening to us as well is most probably already listening for the second time. I would like to know if you have a final thoughts.
Well, I mean, like I'm going to self promote. The people are out there. We're all suffering. We're all having a hard time finding ourselves the next job. Bottom line is, I can talk about how we have to learn about the global situation. We have to learn all this technology. We have to keep up with things. But bottom line is we need to put money in the bank to put food on the table, pay for the roof over our heads, to potentially save money for retirement, and to live our best life. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I do career and interview coaching. My motto or my goal is to make you more confident in presenting the value that you deliver to your company And then also to rationally think about what your next steps are in your career. Everything from somebody comes in and says, I just got a really poor review on my job. What do you think I should do? How can I change that? Or is there another opportunity that I should be looking for? I am interviewing for Google next week. How do I approach that? What are some of the ways I can prepare? How do I practice for it? How do I present myself as confident in my abilities and intelligent, but still not as an asshole, right? I guess it'd be the best way to put it, right? I want you to be able to come in with intellectual humility. I want you to be prepared and have your stories to be able to present in a logical and linear fashion so that people will get it when they hear it, not have to come back and reiterate or or restructure your answer to be able to come up with a coherent picture of what it is that you accomplished. And so I work with people to do that. That is my specialty, and it's really impossible to come up with statistics. But I know from the number of responses that I've been getting from people that I've worked with versus the people I've talked with, and of course I also have, there's reviews online with some of the coaching companies that I do contract through, that having a 4.9 out of 5-star review rating and the feedback I've been getting, it has been very successful for people. It doesn't, you can't measure your success in an interview simply as well from, did I land that particular role? But did I leave a good enough impression that if another role came up in the future, would they reach out to me and ask if I'm available? And I've been having that myself. That has been happening to me where people come and say, well, we chose the other candidate because of whatever circumstance, whether we already had an offer out or whatever. But they also will say, well, we have a new role. We have a different role that's better or more suited to your background. Are you interested? Are you available? You want that to happen, right? In this day and age, there's the other adages. Let's say I give you this analogy. I'm walking through the forest with somebody else as on a hike. I'm in the mountains, and I turn the corner around and I see a grizzly bear. And the grizzly bear stands up, smells us, and starts running at us. Now, we're both running. My colleague looks at me and says, do you think we're going to be able to outrun this bear? And I said, well, I don't know about outrunning the bear. I just need to outrun you. That's today's job market. You need to outrun everybody else to be able to get that job. And I can help you do that.